Serpents and flying dragons have been a staple of ancient myth and legend of indigenous people around the world. The assumption has always been, however, that they are a metaphor and not a literal description of an actual being. But what about the admiration of Jesus and John the Baptist when they sided the generation of vipers and serpents? What if they saw these creatures with their spiritual vision, the overshadowing of humans by astral beings from another dimension? How would they communicate this vision to others? And what about the stories of the Book of Enoch and the forbidden books of the Bible, which refer to the Nephilim, literally those who were cast down, and the Watchers, the so-called fallen angels? Sumeria, the cradle of civilization. Scholars and historians have been totally confounded by the abrupt rise of the Sumerian culture nearly 6,000 years ago in the fertile crescent of the Tigris and Euphrates River. This sudden civilization seemed to appear out of thin air and refused to conform to the popular historical theory of linear development in cultural evolution. Historian Professor Charles Hapgood squarely faces the issue when he writes that today we find primitive cultures coexisting with advanced modern societies on all continents. We should now assume that 20,000 years ago, while Paleolithic people held out in Europe, more advanced cultures existed elsewhere on Earth. Likewise, the rise of the Sumerian has been a major puzzle. Joseph Campbell in The Mask of the God writes, with stunning abruptness, there appears in this little Sumerian mud garden the whole cultural syndrome that has since constituted all high civilizations of the world. William Irwin Thompson puts Sumer is a poor stoneless place for a Neolithic culture to evolve from a peasant community into a full-blown civilization. He writes, but it is a very good place to turn the plains and marshes into irrigated farmland. In short, Sumer is an ideal place to locate a culture already having the technology necessary for urban life and irrigation agriculture. A more stunning conclusion was reached by Professor Samuel N. Kramer, one of the greatest Sumerologists of our time. He reviewed the table of contents from the tablets of Sumer and found that each one of the 25 chapters described a Sumerian and in fact a world's first type of achievement. The Sumerians had the world's first medicine and pharmacist, the world's first brain surgery, the world's first agriculture and farmers, the world's first cosmology and astrology, the world's first law codes, and they utilized a highly advanced technology capable of sophisticated smelting, refining and alloying, as well as petroleum, fuel refining. Most importantly, the Sumerians were responsible for the world's first genetic engineering. Like a mystery without a suspect, the Sumerian story remained a riddle until historian archaeologist Zecharia Sitchin published a remarkable book called The 12th Planet in 1979. In a series entitled The Earth Chronicles, Sitchin described in great detail the crossbreeding program of the Sumerian gods through genetic manipulation. Having spent 30 years studying Sumerian, Assyrian, Babylonian and Hittite texts and the Old Testament in the original Hebrew, Sitchin deciphered the ancient scripts, transcribed them, transliterated them, and then finally translated them. His conclusion, Sitchin writes that the Sumerian civilization did indeed appear out of thin air. The forerunner of Greek and Roman civilization was initiated by the highly advanced race of extraplanetary colonists who came to Earth, established their settlement, and began their single-minded pursuit of wealth and power by mining gold and other minerals necessary to sustain their high-level technology, high-maintenance lifestyle. And who were these colonists? The Sumerians themselves described them as the gods of heavens and earth. They were also called the ancient gods, or the olden gods, and according to Sumerian law, they had come down to earth from heaven. In the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, the Sumerian gods of heaven and earth are referred to as the Nephilim. The Sumerians themselves called the colonists Anunnaki. Stitching translates the biblical verses from Genesis 6:4 as, "The Nephilim were upon earth in those days, and thereafter too, when the sons of the gods collaborated with the daughters of Adam, and they bore children unto them. They were the mighty ones of eternity." And what does Nephilim actually mean? Normally translated in English as giants, the word stems from the Semitic root NFL, to be cast down. It means exactly what it says, those who were cast down upon earth. Contemporary theologians and biblical scholars have tended to avoid the troublesome verses, right stitching, but Jewish writings of the time of the Second Temple did not recognize in these verses the echoes of the ancient traditions of the fallen angels. Invasion of the serpent people. From a combination of our ancient secular and religious sources, it is possible to piece together the true story of our ancestry, which lies in the coming of the alien serpent gods or astronauts who colonized Earth many eons ago. In fact, the evidence lies in the myths and legends of the history of the world. The Sumerian legend of Gilgamesh and Agar points to the interaction of humans and serpents, and of course they are well-known serpent gods of the Indus Valley, the Nagas or serpent race of ancient India, the Hindu epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata, which also deal with the serpent gods. In Chinese history, V. King describes how men and dragons live peacefully together and even intermarried, and the serpent gods in America are described in the Mayan book Chalim, where Itzamana, the serpent god, is revered by the people of the serpent. The story of St. George overcoming the dragon in England and St. Patrick driving the serpents out of Ireland are also part of the Christian mythology. Too many coincidences point to a pattern which is being seemingly willfully ignored by ivory tower mainstream academics and historians. Before the flood. The Anunnaki genetic engineering was done by combining the characteristics of the native ape-man or Neanderthal with their own saurian nature, producing the so-called Adam of the Old Testament. This Adam was half human, half reptile. However, and being a clone, he could not reproduce himself. The Babylonian priest writing in the 3rd century Athens claimed that the man's ancestry and origin can be traced to Ons, an amphibious creature that came from the Persian Gulf to teach the arts of civilization to man. Berosus called the Andoti, which translates as the repulsive ones in Greek. He also refers to them as Muzarus, an abomination. If the tradition has been invented, a more normal attitude would have been to glorify these creatures as the splendid gods or heroes. Yet the fact that these choose to describe their ancestors this way, the Sumerian gods regarded men as a convenience and nothing more. He supplied their wants, kept their cities, and provided cannon fodder for their various military adventures. Sound familiar? The gods could be cruel and unsympathetic masters. They considered humans merely as unruly children, not more important than pets, governed ruthlessly and without sentiment. The ruthless policies of the New World Order reflects this ancient bias in the incessant propaganda that a population crisis exists on the planet and that the best way to remedy the situation is through wars to kill off the cannon fodder, or through abortion to kill off future useless eaters. The Old Testament begins at summer, and there is a large body of religious literature besides the book of Genesis, which deals with the period before the deluge. 3 books of Enoch, the books of Jubilees, Gnostic teachings, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Haggadah of the oral tradition of the Jews, the rabbinical writings, the works of Josephus, and the books of the pseudegrapha, especially the book of Jubilees. What was the Serpent of Eden? Carl Sagan critically titled one of his books The Dragons of Eden, but ancient Jewish legends describe the serpents of Eden as manlike. In other words, He looked like a man and talked like a man. What does this mean? The section of the Haggadah that deals with the creation describes the serpents who inhabited the garden before the creation of Adam as an upright creature that stood on 2 feet, that was equal in height to a camel. The serpent was manlike in many ways. He was tall and stood upright on 2 legs. He did all the work of the gods, particularly the mining and agricultural work, and above all the serpents had an intellect superior to man. These are all attributes of the Anunnaki. According to the Haggadah, the bodies of Adam and Eve have been overlaid with her horny skin. Of Adam's skin it was said that it had been bright as daylight and covered his body like a luminous garment. Adam thus had the outward appearance of a reptile with its scaly skin. It was for this reason that Adam and Eve did not wear, nor did they need clothing for protection or comfort. What did the ancient gods look like? The coming of the Anunnaki coincided with the end of this period, as the earth began to dry out and the meat-eating dinosaurs and small mammals appeared. The reptile gods needed moisture and warmth, and probably the reason why civilization was founded at the mouth of the great river system, the Nile Delta, the Indus River Valley of the Tigris, Euphrates system. It appears the serpent gods were tall, at least 8 to 10 feet, and walked on 2 feet. They had a tail like a reptile, and a tough hide, somewhat like a lizard, but with a large amount of horny or scaly skin. Their hide was generally luscious and smooth, somewhat like a chameleon, and probably varied in different greens and greys. They had short horns on their head, which they considered to be a sign of divinity. Humans were repulsive to them because they were hairy, had soft skins and bony limbs. The sons of the serpent gods, the Nephilim of the Bible, which descended before the deluge and mated with human women, also dabbled in genetic engineering. Eventually, mankind will all have to learn the truth about its origins and face the fact that his gods and ancestors were reptiles, truly monsters by any of our current definitions. There will be a great culture shock as we have never seen before. Satan and the fallen angels are more often pictured as serpent reptilians themselves. In one of the seemingly uncensored passages in the scriptures, Jesus rebuked them, saying, "Ye serpents, ye generations of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them ye shall encourage into your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of the righteous." More reference to the generation of vipers are in Mark 3:7, Mark 12:34-35, and Luke 3:7. They are also called princes of the world. Despite censoring, tampering, and editing of the Bible, cold words or euphemisms for the reptilian race in the Old Testament include terms like the wicked, mighty men, the giants, or the evildoers.